away, you'll get to go to heaven. He said the kingdom of God is here and it's present, and God wants to touch your heart and bring wholeness and healing and deliverance and freedom. That's the gospel. And so I just experienced the gospel over and over and over and over again because it's a transformative thing. So I want to commend you guys, not that everybody has to do this or share a tweet, but those of you who feel something and you're really struggling and you share it in this context, that's huge. It's huge because you're being vulnerable and you're opening up, and that's where the presence of God comes in and touches those places. And I wish it was like one and done, and sometimes it is every once in a while, but if you just stay, be vulnerable, invite the Lord in, have people pray for you, read the word, be vulnerable, be around people who are of like-minded and like faith, you will just find yourself growing and growing and growing. Because the reality is, I know a few of your stories, but I know virtually none of your stories, but I could almost guarantee you basically all of you are pretty broken. And you have stuff that you think is kind of your stuff, and that you're especially broken. And I just want to say you're all broken, but you're not especially broken. You're as broken as like everybody else in this room is. And when we start recognizing that, and that's what's so beautiful about confession, when you guys do that, is because that lie is she or he might be broken, but I'm really, like, if people really knew how broken I was, it's like, no, you're just as broken as I am, it's different, we're all broken. But we don't have to stay that way, we can change and transform and all that, so, it's good. So, tonight, we're going to, Face ID is not working. Sometimes our Face IDs will work. Same phone.
Mine works for yours doesn't work for mine.
So tonight, I'm going to be talking about top 10 things to look for in a spouse. So no one's married here, so it's very, very appropriate. And I so wish somebody would have shared this with me when I was your age. Oh my gosh. And the reality is there truly a top 10? No. I mean, there isn't like, these are the 10. But this is 10 that are very, very, very important. So it's top 10 things. Here's the title, if you're thinking about the title. And it's we're recording it, right?
Yeah.
Good. So I'll put this on a little YouTube thing. So it's top 10 things to look for in a spouse and work on in yourself. Doesn't that make sense? If you want this to be in your spouse, shouldn't you be preparing yourself in that same way? And some of these things are very obvious, like, oh yeah, but I'm just going to tell you, some of this will be, you'll be like, whoa, I've never heard someone talk like that, and that's okay. Work it out, wrestle with it. I always think I'm right because I'm saying it, but it's maybe different than what you hear a lot of times. So the first thing you're going to find, and I printed off, sitting right there, right on the little white table. There's a sheet, stack of paper, right there. I don't think I printed enough, but just maybe share one. Yeah, I think I have maybe 8 or 10. So maybe one for every 2 people or something. But what you're going to notice on this list of 10 is number 10 has to do with they love God. It's number 10.
That's for last.
So, which is, like, what do you mean it's number 10? Well, here's what I want to tell you. You can have someone who has that as their number 1. Oh, is that blank?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Wouldn't that be funny if all my notes were blank? I put it as number 10 very, very purposely. Because the reality is, you won't be able to have 1 through 9 if you don't know the Lord. If you're not seeking and following the Lord, you're not going to be able to do 1 through 9. But we have this false paradigm. It's an overly spiritualized paradigm. It's this. If I just find someone who loves God, everything else is set. Let me just tell you, that is flat out wrong. It is naive. It is overly idealistic. And it is just not true. Because you have lots of people who really authentically love God, but they are just an absolute train wreck of a life, of a person. Not because they're bad people, they just don't have these other components. So what I would like to do is, maybe what I'll do is I'll stop after each one. And if you have a question, rather than like buzzing through all 10, stop after each one. So, somebody read number 1.
Humility. God resists the proud. You want the
Yeah.
ones?
Yeah.
God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. James 4:6.
So, number 1, I believe this with all my heart. The number 1 attribute you want to have in yourself that you should be working on, and that you want to see in your spouse, is that they are humble. Because without humility, first of all, James kind of says it, like if the person you're interested in is proud and arrogant, God's going to be resisting that person. And once you get married, he's going to be resisting your marriage. Because arrogance and pride and hard-heartedness, he resists it. And you can't have depth if there's no humility. You can't have any kind of deep communication, because what ends up happening is your heart is hard. Your heart is unwilling to, like what several of you did tonight, open up and be transparent. Like if you can't be vulnerable and open, you can't be actually intimate. You can't actually have closeness in your heart to somebody else if you're not willing to expose who you are. So transparency. I'll read a couple of those other bullets, Jonathan.
You can get nowhere with anyone without humility. This is the foundational building block to everything in your marriage. You want to be in continual conflict. Find someone who is proud, hard-hearted.
So if you want to have a marriage full of conflict, find someone who's proud, right? That's a guaranteed recipe for having conflict on a regular basis. Can someone else read the next couple bullets?
Transparent, honest with self and others. Signs of humility. Quick to apologize, takes responsibility for what they did not. Takes responsibility for what they did, not what you did. Asks for forgiveness even when it's not their fault.
Ask for forgiveness, not necessarily like they take responsibility for something that's not theirs, but doesn't need the other person to, like, Jonathan may have wronged me, but I also did something. I don't need him to take responsibility. Humility is, I can own what I did, even if Jonathan doesn't own what he did. That's humility. And it's, I guess without it, I don't think you can really have any kind of depth. Without some measure of humility, you can't have any kind of communication with each other that goes really anywhere. But here's the thing that's deceptive though. You can have an enjoyable conversation. You can enjoy a person who is relatively proud, but it doesn't seem like it at all. Because, it's easy in the beginning. It's easy to hang out, it's easy to enjoy each other, but one of the best ways to identify humility is the ability to take responsibility for their own stuff. And if someone can't apologize, that is a red flag, and I'm just telling you, run. Because that's not something that changes easily. That's not like, oh, well, they just need to read a book, and then they'll be humble. If they can't apologize for something that they've done, that's a clear sign. So that's it. Any questions on humility or nuances to that or anything?
Something I heard once that was really good to me that stood out was, it was a guy speaking on a podcast, and he's like, my wife did me so wrong, and I knew she was in the wrong. It was one of the only times that I fully could say I did nothing wrong, and she just really hurt me.
Yeah.
And we could have gone all the next week being disconnected, not talking to each other, sleeping in a different room.
Yeah.
But in that, we're called to forgive. So even though she didn't come to me and ask for forgiveness for what she did, I forgave her without having her come to me and be humble. Which I thought was so just the biggest act of a godly man that I've ever seen. I was like, wow, that's strong.
That's a beautiful example of humility.
Yeah.
Because the Jesus call to forgive, he doesn't say forgive only if they ask you for forgiveness.
Yeah.
Forgive only if they take responsibility for what they did. It doesn't say that. It says we're to walk in forgiveness. But to forgive, you have to be humble.
And if you don't forgive, then you can't be forgiven by the Father.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right, we'll keep buzzing and we can come back if anybody wants to come back. Number 2, and sometimes I put it as number 1, but I put it as number 2. Family health. Either by birth, meaning that person you're interested in, or either you were born in a great family. And what I mean by great family is husband, mom, and dad were mostly healthy, not perfect. There is no such thing. You grew up in a home, or the person you're interested in grew up in a home where it was a healthy mom and dad. they interacted with each other in a healthy way, then you got the lottery, and you got born into a healthy family. Great. And there are some, and less and less these days, but there are some. If you or the person you're interested in didn't have that experience, then you got to be full on work your stuff out. You got to be willing to work on your stuff. So if you're interested in a guy, and the guy has a super broken family, and his mom and him and his mom are broken, him and his dad are broken, if he hasn't dealt with that, and when I say dealt with it, not like oh yeah, I have some issues, like really gone after it in prayer, asking for prayer, potentially even depending on how broken, depending on counseling. I've done so much counseling. I'm a huge proponent of counseling, as long as it's the right kind of counseling, Christian-based, prayer-focused, that kind of thing. But if you are interested in somebody and they have a broken family and they have not worked on it, this is a sociological, psychological fact. They will recreate their family system in your marriage, period. So if you're interested in a girl and her family is wacko and she hasn't dealt with any of it, you will create, that family will be created. I mean, there's like, they do these charts and they show you these family systems, and well, this family had, whatever the dysfunction is, everyone was super jealous. You just see it, next generation, everyone is super jealous. You're like, what the heck? They never dealt with the issue of jealousy. You fill in the blank. Adultery, drunkenness, it's just like, click, 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 just goes generation to generation. I mean, my dad was an alcoholic. My dad's dad was an alcoholic. My dad's dad was an alcoholic. And that's weird. I wonder, it's like, it's a real thing. And so if the person you're interested in hasn't dealt with their family of origin stuff, that's bad. And if you have family of origin stuff, and just start to really see it as a place of brokenness in the core of who you are, and begin to ask the Lord, touch that place, touch that place, touch that place. I think that's all I have to say, but you can't be healthy if you didn't grow up healthy, or if you haven't worked on yourself hardcore. Any questions there? So again, this is the beauty of the gospel, right? The beauty of Jesus is that he takes broken families and he makes us, or people who come from broken families, and he makes us whole. That's the gospel. That's the good news. So you're hosed if you didn't grow up in a good family. No, you have Jesus. And I wish it was easy. It's not easy, but you pursue Jesus, and these places of brokenness will become more and more whole. Yeah.
I have a question more about like the family health thing.
Yeah.
How do you know if you've completely fixed it? I know you never truly know until you get into a relationship and kind of see how you dealt with everything and stuff.
Yeah.
But do you think that to know if you've healed the wound enough, you have to get into another relationship, or do you think there's a different way of knowing?
Such a great question. I think that's partially yes. There's some things you won't know until you're in a relationship, but a great way to test yourself is to enter back into your family system. Meaning, I'm assuming some of you live at home still, some of you don't, but go back into your family system with your dad, your mom, or whoever is your part of your family, and see how whole you are in those settings, dealing with your sister or your brother or your mom, and that's a great indicator of how healthy are you when the whole family gets together, your biological family, or whatever part, however much of your family there is that gets together. That's a great litmus test. And they say the fastest path towards wholeness is go into your family system. The family system is what they call in psychological terms your original family. Go into your original biological family and let the stuff surface, because it does more than anywhere else. And then let the Lord meet you in that, not necessarily in the moment, because your mom or your dad or your brother may not be into Jesus or open to that. But when you step back out of it, it's okay, Lord, it's a humility piece. Lord, I'm recognizing, wow, I'm really broken still as a result of my dad being really rude. Yeah.
Sorry, I have one more question.
No, I love it.
Well, this is backstory, but
Yeah.
I haven't talked to my dad in years, but so when you mean get involved with your family, the family that's in your life more of?
Okay, so great. So we'll just go here, because you're opening yourself up a little bit.
Sorry.
It's great. This is where it gets I think powerful. So Carmen, right?
Yeah.
Carmen. without knowing any of your backstory, which we would unpack a little bit more, my recommendation would be to begin to engage your dad, unless he is physically dangerous. Okay, he is.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, there. That's okay. That's good. That's so. Then I would do a few other things. I would do. So I would. And maybe you may have already done all this.
Mm-hmm.
I would write a letter
Okay.
where you are, and it can be multiple letters, because since you can't communicate with him because he's not safe.
Yeah.
And your situation is true. I would. The only thing I want to say is often I think we say someone's not safe. And I'm not saying this is not you.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about physical threat. I think we have to be really careful because our culture is so quick to say, well, my mom's just not safe, or my dad's not safe, or my brother's not safe. And I understand why people say that real quickly because, they hurt my feelings, or they upset me, or they say mean things. My encouragement is just learn to be able to not put yourself in harm's way physically for sure. And if they're emotionally just off the charts abusive, then sure, but set that aside. With your situation, that you should stay away. Writing a letter allows you to get in touch with how you really feel, because you may not be able to be totally connected to how you feel about him because you can't engage with him because he's unsafe. But if you write a letter and the letter is like unscripted, it's just whatever comes out, and then you invite the Lord into that process, and you probably need to do it multiple times. I think that is a very, very powerful. Writing a letter, they call it a psalm of lament. So the Psalms, a lot of the Psalms that David wrote are like him saying, God, why did you let the enemy do? Why did the evil prosper? It's like he's complaining, but what he's doing is he's being honest and humble before God, which allows what? His heart's exposed. He's talking in this way, and God comes into that place. And so for you, I would say that would be a very powerful thing, is to write and it's your dad. Even if you haven't been around him maybe your entire life, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. I wish it did. I wish it was like, oh cool, he was just my dad. I haven't seen him since I was 1. Our biological parents, no matter how little you interact with them, have so much power over our lives until we deal with what needs to be dealt with. And so letters, I would encourage, by a show of hands, who of you, if you feel comfortable, have a relatively broken relationship with your mom or your dad? Okay. I mean, look at that. It's literally everybody but 2. Right? So it just shows you where we're at. So sometimes our parents aren't mature enough to handle it. So I'm not advocating go to your mom or your dad and say, hey, I want to work on stuff. They might freak out. Like, what do you mean? Like, I didn't do anything. I mean, seriously, like, don't do that. Unless they're really humble and really open. Like my parents, as broken as they were back in the day, they're so open to like dealing with stuff and all the things of the past. We brought it all in the light, and it's just been amazing. Now that is very unusual, but you don't have to have that. So you can, yeah.
Does it have to be done like with both parents like together? Because like if your parents are separated,
Oh no.
can it be just like because I see with your family, right? Like your mom and your dad, there's like it's like all 3 of you guys have kind of like sorted it all out.
Yeah.
But I feel like I don't know if some people can relate here, but if you go
Very
to one
unrealistic
parent,
as an expectation for anybody.
well, if you go to one parent, they're gonna tell you if you try to get really real about your childhood or whatever,
Yeah.
they're gonna tell you their side of the story, right? And then you go to your mom or your whatever, the other parent, they're like, oh no, it was all their fault. It wasn't, whatever.
Yeah.
And so you kind of like, who do I believe? And it's
First you
hard
have to
you know-
identify the purpose of the conversation, right? So if you're going, so you're asking this, you're making a.
Let's say they're laying it all out, like just like bringing up all this childhood stuff that happened or whatever.
Well, I would say when you go to your mom, let's just say it's your mom,
Okay.
you're going to go to your mom and you're not going to say, hey, I'm going to lay out the places where I was hurt. I'm not doing it because I'm angry at you or I need you to defend yourself. And I definitely can't have you blaming dad because I'm going to go to dad and do the same thing. But this isn't about you defending. And so if you don't feel like you can do that, then that's okay.
So what should I want to hear from her?
Well, first you got to ask the question: is she mature enough and humble enough to be able to apologize and take ownership?
Yeah.
Only you know that.
And move forward of fixing it.
maybe there maybe not be much you can fix because it's past stuff. But the bigger question is, can she handle or he handle hearing
The
it?
humility of it.
Can they
Yeah.
heal? Can they hear it and just like let it? Because a lot of times we think, like even, and this is my encouragement to you guys in your confession time. A lot of times we feel like we need, like Jonathan shares, you know, I'm just an idiot, I hate myself or whatever, you know, does something like that. And we feel like we gotta like jump in there. You know, like sometimes you actually literally need to say nothing. You don't need to pray. Because I mean, you can just bless him, but there's something to be said about just opening yourself up and allowing the Lord into that place. There's the power. But we think, well, I gotta say something smart, like, Jonathan, just so you know, like, I think you're really smart, or something, you know? And it's like, it actually can kill the very thing, because it's vulnerable. And anyways, so I would just say, you gotta really determine if your parents are mature enough to be able to handle it. And it's okay if they aren't, and the majority of our parents are not. That's just the reality. Not because they don't wanna be, but guess what? Their parents were jacked up. And their parents were jacked. It's like, ta, 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 ta. Your dad never said he loved you. Well, guess what? His dad never said he even liked him, let alone, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
so at least he said he liked you, you know, it's being able to see, like, okay, wow, my dad was bad or my mom was jacked, but she's a lot better than my grandma. But the letter, I think this is a little bit of a insight as a tool, is a letter of lament. I would start with a letter with your mom and your dad, because it'll allow you to get in touch with how you really feel. There's nobody who's gonna like say something, oh, don't say that, or it's just you sharing your soul. And it's not just you and the computer, guess who it is? It's you and the Lord, right? It's so powerful, yeah.
Kind of reminds me of what Sarah brought up earlier with the podcast she listened to. I have in the past like kind of had that conversation with my parents, and it was just a lot of like defensiveness.
Yes.
And it's something that I know they'll never really take accountability for.
Yeah.
But even though we'll never really have that like relationship, I feel like I don't need them to understand to be able to forgive them. Like, because forgiving them is for me, it's not for them.
That's right, that's right. It's so good. So yeah, I think it's so important. Them being able to say, oh, I'm so sorry. That's wonderful. Completely unnecessary. Wonderful. Like, I don't want to downplay that, but it's unnecessary. But we are really quick to say, oh, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. But we're not actually in touch with the real pain of what our mom or our brother or our sister or our dad did. We don't really allow ourselves to just come unhinged. Not like in some like wacko way, but like, I'm just, at the computer, and you're saying, okay, Holy Spirit, I'm just inviting you into this. I'm not even sure how I don't even want to write this letter, but whatever. So, Dad, I don't even know where to start, but I just want to let you know, you're just, or it can be to the Lord about your dad. You can kind of do it either way, but wow. I've done a lot of these letters, and it's very, very helpful. I've seen lots of people get huge freedom by doing it.
Yeah, I feel like for me too, the expectation, I kind of had to give up the expectation that like forgiving them would mean the relationship would all of a sudden be fine.
That's right.
But instead of like mending that relationship, coming to terms with like it's never gonna be good, but at least I have that peace that like I'm okay with it. Like I forgive them.
Yes, yes. And in some ways, the relationship does improve because you no longer need it to be something
Right.
other than what it is.
Yeah.
You can just enjoy your dysfunctional whoever. You just enjoy them. Like, oh, okay, you don't have to like,
Yeah.
I need my mom to stop doing that. No, you don't. No, you don't. You gotta get healed so you don't get triggered every time she does that thing. You need to get healed. That's you. That's your issue, not hers. She's got her own thing. But if you get, and I had to work on this hard with my mom and my dad. I would get upset that they were upset because, and they were being upset in a wrong way. But I was like, wait a second. That's them. I have to take responsibility for getting triggered by them. They were getting triggered. I was like, I'm not doing anything. And I'm like, wait a second, now I'm getting triggered by you being triggered. I'm like, okay. So it's just owning, it's back to humility, right? It's owning your stuff regardless of what the other person does or doesn't do, yeah.
With the like triggered stuff, like I feel like I get very triggered because like with like my dad, like that's kind of like the bigger part, but like we really butt heads because we're kind of like similar in a way to like,
Yeah.
we very much like can't just like sit back and like be quiet when something bothers us.
Yeah.
So like me and him like we really butt heads. So I've like gotten the I'm sorry like many times, but it's like over and over and over and over again. So
Yeah.
it's not a true I'm sorry.
Right.
So I feel like each time I forgave him, it like pushed me back farther.
Wow.
So like it's hard for me to like fully forgive because I'm just expecting it to happen again.
Yes.
So it's like I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, tell me your name again.
Caitlin.
No, sorry.
Reese.
Reese, so
You know who you're pointing at.
Yeah, so what Reese said about, I think your forgiveness, a lot of times our forgiveness feels connected to what they do and don't do, because it's really nice when our dad says, I'm sorry. But then he does it again, it's like, ow, that hurts. And what we do is we protect. We want to self-protect. But if we can get to a place where we're forgiving, knowing he's going to continue to do, like it's my dad, he's not an alcoholic anymore, but he was an alcoholic, and he apologized for being an alcoholic. It's like, I knew he was going to continue to be an alcoholic. So it's like learning to, being able to forgive that person, even though you know they're going to do the same thing over, without needing them not to do the same thing over.
Yeah, because I think it goes back to a place where hurt people, so you have to realize the reason your dad's doing something is because when he was a kid, he was probably hurt that same way.
Oh,
He's developed a habit, and that he never did that inner healing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can't communicate with your parent or whatever, you can't get a letter, you can't communicate at all. You just have to go back to your childhood and realize, how did they hurt me? Go back to a specific event, and you have to invite God into that situation. You have to heal that situation to be able to move forward. Like for example, for me, like fear of abandonment, I was moving different cities all over the state and country at some point, and I would leave all my best friends, all of every relationship I was in. I'd have to I didn't have phones back when I was little, so it was tough, and I just have that wound. But luckily, I've been able to invite God into that situation to move forward. So when I do have friendships and relationships in the future, I'm able to handle those.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think one thing too was really discouraging for me for a while, until I'm like, oh, okay, this is normal, is I would have a wound like that, or with my dad, or whatever it is. I would deal with it. I would have like a really powerful moment, right? So I'm praying for him, I'm sharing it, I'm writing about it, I'm crying, I'm free. And I'm like, I guess I'm not. I would like get triggered. I'm like, what the heck? And so this is the visual that I read in the book, and it's stuck with me. And it's this idea of, imagine yourself, you got a hatchet. You're in the middle of a jungle. In the jungle, all the leaves and the foliage and all of that represents your brokenness, right? And you're just, you're trying to get out of the jungle, right? You're just cutting through. And all of a sudden you come into an open area. It's just grass, it's open. But then you zoom out, and you realize that's just an open area in the middle of a huge jungle. And so you've got a little you got a reprieve, but you got still a whole jungle. And so I just want to say that just be okay that it's a process and that it's a long journey getting whole, but it's worth pursuing wholeness. So keep going after your dad, the pain there. Keep going after the abandonment, even though you've dealt with it. Keep going after it. Keep going after the mom and the dad with it. Keep going until it's gone. And if it pops back up, don't be discouraged. Just say, oh, there's more to deal with. Lord, invite you in, and you deal with it. Someone worried about it.
Something that I have, like maybe, I don't know. When I went to YWAM, I did exactly what you did. Like I thought I got crazy healing. Like people were like prophesying, like you're gonna go back and your relationships are gonna be fixed because you did this. And it was fixed with me, but it wasn't fixed for them. Like my heart changed, but their hearts didn't. And so in that, I think for someone who's chasing after wholeness, when you realize like, okay, even if my parents aren't choosing to be whole with me, it's my choice to be whole for my future and my family and my husband. Like you have that choice to dictate how it's gonna go from here on out. And so I think when you realize like you have the authority to change on wholeness, on your family, on the way you were raised, like I think that's really helped me of like, just because my parents don't want it doesn't mean that I don't get to have that, because it's a personal choice and it's a personal humility of, okay, I have these issues, so I have to chase after wholeness. And maybe that looks like praying for them instead, because they don't want to be humble and come and forgive and seek wholeness with you. But okay, Lord, would you change their hearts? Would you soften their hearts to even be open to changing? So that's really helped me.
It's good.
I think it's cool too, like having the optimistic view of you can change the line in your generations. Like if he didn't do the work that he did, I would be jacked. I'd be more jacked than I am now, you know. And I got like so blessed to be able to have so much less baggage than I would have if he didn't go through the hours and hours and hours of counseling and inner work and inviting the Lord in. And now I'm gonna get to a place where I'm pursuing the spot of dealing with stuff with my mom and stuff with different relationships that now my sons and daughters can be even more whole than me. And it's like we changed the narrative from getting worse and worse to like we're raising generations that are gonna love God, and that's the family piece. It's beautiful. And so we're actually doing the work that's gonna change the world through our kids, you know? It's like it's super.
Yes. So again, just because I think it's visually powerful, raise your hand if your mom or your dad, you have a broken relationship with your mom or your dad. I mean, I say like significantly broken, not just like, oh, she, okay. So, I mean, that's why, isn't that wild? But the gospel, the beautiful gospel is that we can, starting with your generation, your family, you know, each of us can completely flip the script. And that's a really good news.
So let's say you've identified the wound that you have, right?
Yeah.
What's the process that either you went through or you give to us to go through? So it's whatever that is.
It's hard to answer the question because there's so much. But what I would say the principle is bringing the honest place of what that is, the memory, the feeling, the emotion to the Lord, either in a time of prayer personally, in a time of prayer with other people, in a time of counseling with somebody who's Holy Spirit, led. It's through, I think I would say the two most. If you said, well, I only have two, give me two things I could do, two tools. Scripture is obviously the number one tool. Just be in the Scripture on a regular basis. But in two practices, one is called the welcoming prayer. So welcoming prayer is literally what it sounds like. You're welcoming the Lord into that place. So let's just take. Somebody want to give me an example of a wound? So we're working with a real wound, like a real place.
Abandonment.
What did you say?
Abandonment.
Abandonment. So, and when would that? What would be an example that that's sort of like? How would you know that that's surfacing?
My parents were divorced, and
So, how does that surface?
in a relationship.
Yes.
Like just fear that a really good relationship, like there's nothing going wrong, like you're gonna be abandoned by them. Just
So out of nowhere, you
out
just
of
feel like
nowhere.
something's gonna happen.
Yeah, like
Okay.
oh, I feel like I'm losing them,
Okay.
or like they're gonna walk away from me.
Okay. So, what you would do in that situation, this is again, I've done this. This has been the most powerful practice for me. Is when I'm feeling that abandonment. So I'm afraid that Ruthie's gonna leave me. And what I do is I get in touch with the feeling. You gotta get in touch with the actual feeling. Why? Because it's vulnerability, it's humility. I'm so scared. So you get aware of the feeling, and then you welcome the Lord into that feeling as you're having it. It's not a conceptual thing like, oh, I shouldn't have abandonment. God, heal my. It's like all head stuff. It doesn't work. It has to be where your head and your heart are you're working together. And you're having this like, oh wait, I'm feeling abandoned. Okay, that's my rational thought. Okay, now I'm gonna get connected to my emotions. Now, I'm literally, okay, Lord, you just quiet yourself wherever you're at, and just, Lord, I invite you into that feeling. I invite you into that abandonment, jealousy, anger, whatever the word is, whatever the thing is. And you just, and then you do it for 30 seconds, do it for 20 minutes, however long you have. So that's the most powerful practice, other than being in the Scripture on a regular basis, that I can recommend.
And not all the time, it's not always like instant. I just share, because I got shared that with me like years ago, and I got frustrated because I've done it 15 times and I'm not feeling anything. And you've had times where it's you do it and there's a slight shift, and then it's that happening. So
Yeah.
don't get discouraged if it's not instant. It's not an instant whatever 180. But
And here's the other thing, and I've taught people who aren't Christians this prayer because it's so powerful. I know it works. Like a lot of times, even to this day, sometimes I'm like, this isn't gonna work. But I'm gonna do it anyways. You know, like you don't have to have all this like, I know this is gonna work when I pray this. Just Jesus responds to vulnerability, and His power is present to move in your heart when you open it up to Him. And I practice it to this day. You know, little, I practice it on lots of stuff that I don't like what I'm doing, how I'm acting, how I'm being, invite the Lord in, and it just, again, it doesn't happen necessarily overnight, but I just know it'll work over time. Huge subject, right? I mean, getting a whole, this is like core to basically everything. Our family, becoming a family, you gotta get healed from your original family, otherwise you're gonna repeat that in your new family. I think it's number 2, it could easily be number 1. I probably should make it number 1, but humility, I think you can't get to the family room. You can't get to the family room without humility, so that's why I put humility as number 1. But this is so central to you getting healthy and finding the right spouse, and to you finding the right spouse. Make sure they are taking this serious, and make sure you're taking it serious. Any other questions? All right, can somebody read number 3?
Handles conflict well, evidenced by quality relationships. You can't have deep friendship and family relationship if you don't handle conflict well.
Go ahead and read that last.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Conflict can become easy, can have hard conversations. If it's not a big deal, then it's not a big deal to talk about it. If your spouse doesn't have any good relationships with friends and family, they won't magically have them with you. This is your clearest resume.
So does that make sense, the resume part? Like, go to a job, you get your resume and you can see, like if I look at a resume, so I have a company and I hire people and I see that you're only there for 6 months and 2 months and 1 year and 6 months and 2, like, that tells me something, right? That person isn't able to stay in the job, which says a lot. People don't like to hear that, but it does. It's the resume of your boyfriend, girlfriend, is they don't have really close relationships, like at least a couple. And when I mean close, not like the dudes and they like to whatever, I mean close, where they're honest, they're open. That means they don't know how to have a close relationship. And they don't know how to deal with conflict, because conflict is a part of close relationship. If you don't have conflict, you don't actually have a close relationship. Now, it doesn't mean, therefore, you should always have conflict in order to have a close relationship. But if you can't have conflict, so Jonathan and I have a very, very close relationship. I can't remember the last time we had conflict. I mean, now do we disagree? But we don't. So it's not. I'm not advocating. I used to be of the camp of like, you should be having conflict, pretty consistently. Like I'm totally not of the camp anymore. I'm of the camp. You should be able to have conflict and not be afraid of conflict. But you shouldn't always have conflict. So sorry, that's kind of convoluted, but. You want to be able to have close relationships, which is really hard. It's really hard. I heard somebody's talking about in here, just how it's hard to have close relationships with females, but it's true. It's hard to have close relationships with males, men to men. I mean, really, where they're really opening up. It's tough. We're not very good at it. Guess what? Just getting married and putting a ring on your finger and going through a ceremony doesn't like wave some magic wand over you and you suddenly know how to have a close relationship. It's not how it works. So why are most marriages just roommates? They're just roommates for the most part. Once they've been married for a while, okay, I'll take the kids here. Okay, all right, I'll see you. That's why so many marriages divorce after the kids graduate, because they just became roommates. Because
Can you describe that a little more? Like what you mean? Like they just don't like sit down and talk about anything because they're always like gone.
Well, yes, but why? Because they don't know how to be close. They never worked.
Okay.
They don't know how to have a conversation.
Like lack of intimacy.
Yeah, there's a lack of intimacy because you can't be intimate if you're not willing to be honest and open and work through stuff and talk and be vulnerable. And you can't really be intimate. I mean, you can like love somebody kind of. You can be close kind of, but it's all relatively surface because you've never really fully opened your soul up to that person. So that's the handles conflict well. Any questions on that part? All right, self-control. Can somebody read that in the bullets?
Self-control of emotions, hormones, anger, appetites, desires, sexuality, ego. Confession is one of the greatest tools when seeking to grow in self-control. Scripture is daily food, fasting is powerful as well.
So just this whole thing of self-control. So I'll just pick on the ladies for a second. So I have two girls I have three girls, but two that are 11 and 13. And so they're just beginning their whole hormonal cycle. Well, culturally speaking, we have created a culture that says it's okay. You have an excuse, right? Your hormones are truly, something's happening with your hormones once a month. And so you're just going to be a little biatchy for a couple days. That's just the way it is, right? Well, yeah, if you don't give another alternative, which is, it's kind of like a man. Well, I just got a lot of testosterone. When I'm fired up, I get pissed. And that's just the way it is. It's kind of man I am. Yeah, it's true. Until you choose to have self-control over your anger, or until you choose to have self-control over your hormonal, fluctuations. Like, it's the ability. Self-control is a fruit of the spirit. Like, we can have self-control over our emotions, even if whatever our emotions are connected to, we can action. So it's really beautiful to watch my two daughters, my middle daughters. Just my older one, especially 13-year-old. Everyone talks about, oh man, when girls hit the teenage years, it is lights out. Man, you just hear how parents talk about teenage girls at 13. That's not been our experience. I mean, because she knows, oh, I can choose to go with how I feel and just let it, let myself just, or I can develop self-control. And so, well, it's the same with guys, right? Guys have just like, well, I'm just an angry guy, and when someone really pisses me off, I just get pissed off. It's the way it is. It's like, okay. Or you can choose to develop self-control. Same thing around our appetites, physical appetites, sexual appetites. All of it we can have self-control over. Now it's developed. It takes Holy Spirit empowerment. It takes vulnerability, but it's a very, very strong attribute that you want to have in yourself. When your kids, like I was testing myself. I was telling Roman yesterday. So this doesn't sound terrible, but I never am by myself with all my kids. Either Ruthie, my wife's here, or my mom's here, or my dad's here, or if I'm here with most of the kids, I'll have maybe the middle girls here. So I always have help. Last night, I didn't have any help. Everyone was gone, and I had the three little ones. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I never, and I had an opportunity. I wanted to test myself with patience. So I was outside, and I was building a little mini trampoline. And the directions are not very clear. So I had my three kids, my 1-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, wanting to help. And then I had three of their little kids come over, and they wanted to help. So I just sat them all down and said, let's all build this together. And I was testing myself purposely, like, let's just do it. And I didn't get triggered, and I didn't get angry. Well, a lot of men in that situation would get angry, and what would they say? Well, I mean, I got all these kids, and I'm trying to fix this, and and they would justify not having control over their emotions. And we don't need to do that. Like, with Jesus, it's a process. You can grow in your self-control.
Is awareness like the same thing? Like having awareness of those problems?
It's not the same thing, but it's the beginning.
I was gonna say, because if you're aware, then like when you know those things come up, or if you know it's about that
Yes.
time for guys and girls, of
Yes.
like, okay, like you understand what you're going through, and that helps you to have self-control to be in control of those thoughts. and
For
emotions.
sure. So awareness is where it starts. You gotta be self-aware. And then the second thing is, go back to number one,
Yeah,
humility, right? And willing to not like, well, you just made me angry, or you're just being annoying, or it's like, wait a second, why am I so annoyed? Maybe you are being annoying, but why am I so annoyed? It's the owning it yourself and not being a victim to whatever it is. Well, it's just the way I feel. It's just the way I am. You don't have to be a victim. So awareness is the start, but you got to take it all the way through. All right, for sake of time, I'm gonna bust through the rest of these. So I purposely use words that are Old English and we don't use anymore because they're kind of offensive and I like it. So dutiful and industrious. Basically, you want who in yourself and who you're looking for. You don't want them to be lazy and slothful and they only do what's absolutely demanded of them. You want your husband or your wife to just be someone who is on it and works hard and doesn't wait to ask for like, oh, you need me to help you? Okay, you know, like they just want, they're dutiful. They like, you know what? Part of my duty is to serve and to come alongside other people and help, and I'm going to be a hard worker, and we have a lack of that. You know, we have a lot of a lack of that in our culture in particular. So work on that in yourself and pray that you would find someone who has that in them. So my wife is unbelievable in this area. I mean, she's just to a fault to some degree sometimes, but it's like so rare, I think, to see in spouses just that doesn't need to have someone pat them on the back, doesn't need someone to acknowledge them, just hey, this is what I do, and I want to help and I want to serve, and that's what we should be as men and as women. Learner, you just want somebody who's hungry. You want someone who's hungry to grow. They want to learn. They haven't arrived. They haven't figured it all out. They haven't, you know, I know what I want to do in my life, and I've already kind of gone through school. And you want someone who's open. They want to read. Maybe they're not a big reader. A lot of people these days aren't much readers, but they're like interested. They want to listen to podcasts, and they want to like grow, and they want to watch something on YouTube. Like, hey, let's learn. What is this whole new area of whatever? You know, just a learner about God for sure, but a learner about anything. Humor. I think humor is really big. Doesn't mean they have to be like a comedian. It just means that they don't, one, take themselves too seriously and take life too serious. I mean, life is serious in some ways, but man, you've got to be able to laugh at yourself. You got to be okay if other people laugh at you, and you got to be able to laugh at them, and that's healthy. If people get offended when people laugh at them, and that's a sure sign that there's a lot of, back to number 2, family brokenness, and number 1, humility, that they haven't done the loop. You know, recognize your brokenness and you operate in humility. I want to keep buzzing unless you guys interrupt me, okay? Forgiving and flexible. It's a little bit repetitive, but it's different in that you're quick to forgive, and you're flexible. You're flexible with things and events and stuff, and you don't have to have it your way. So you're just flexible. And then you're also in that forgiving when other people drop the ball or do something wrong. 9 is generous, just generous with everything. Their money, their time, their energy, they have a generous heart. And again, this isn't just about what you're looking for, it's what you're seeking to develop in yourself. And then last but not least, loves God and is surrendered to Jesus. Doesn't have to be lit, like they got to just be so on fire. Like, no, just love God, surrender to Jesus. Not just like, well, they love God. I mean they're kind of like Presbyterian, or nothing wrong with Presbyterian. One of my best friends is Presbyterian, loves Jesus. But I'm just saying, just because they're Presbyterian or Pentecostal, or like just because they're in some church that seems healthy, doesn't mean jack. Like, do they individually love God and are they surrendered to Jesus? Like, Jesus, I just want you to have your way in my life. There you go. There's your top 10.
I got one final question.
Yeah.
So now you've like gone through them all, right? So the title of this is like what to look for in a spouse. What would you say to the people in the room that are maybe looking at this list and are in a relationship right now and are like saying like, oh, well, maybe I or my partner or someone doesn't, they're lacking in that. And so when, with your, when is it pack your bags and hey, maybe you gotta like rethink this? Or is it like how much, you can work on these things? Is this like something that you can work on, or you have to find already in somebody already? Like, what would you, how would you navigate that?
Well, I'd say it's a continuum, right? So humility, all of us in this room, here's Jesus and here's, some dirtbag or whatever. We're on that continuum, right? So none of us are here, and hopefully none of us are here. So it's the question is, let's just say you're the girl that you're interested in, Is she closer to here, or is she moving in this direction? Moving in this direction, like you know, okay, they're not really into learning, but I know they're open to it. Cool, moving in the direction. Their family is really broken. They haven't worked on it, but they want to, and they start to. Cool. Like that's not like lights out. Pack the bags.
Yeah.
But you could, for those of you who are in a relationship, you could just use this as a little list. Say, hey, let's talk through this list. What do you think about this list? And see what they say. You know, that's a good indicator. That's a good little way of like, it doesn't have to be this list obviously, but talking about this kind of stuff. It's like we talk about so many things. Like, are we both, you know, conservative in our values, or do we both love music? Do we both love the mountains? Like, oh, that's all cool. It's like it belongs like down like 40 or something. You know, like it's cool. I mean, obviously, if you're like super MAGA, Trumpy, you should probably aren't going to do well with a, you know, Kamala-y or vice versa, right? I mean, you're that's. So I'm not saying those aren't important, but we value all that stuff way up here. Like, do they like to work out? You know, good. That's like cool. I like to work out, but let that's like number 14 or 18 or 27 or 32, or, you know. Again, top 10 doesn't mean these are the only things, but man, start here and build from here. And then another part to your question, you know, most of us, I'm just going to be blunt, most of us in this room who are in a serious relationship are unwilling, more than likely, to pull the plug if we're already head over heels for the person, even if we see big red flags, just so you know that. The reason of that is because our hearts are deceptive beyond our understanding. And so we'll get in a relationship, and when our heart is too connected, and that's why you gotta be careful. When our heart gets too connected, our heart will tell us whatever we need to hear to convince us that we should stay in the relationship. And so, do not awaken love before it's time, is a proverb, right? Do not awaken love in your heart for a person before it's time. So why? Because you will deceive yourself into staying stuck with that person. You know, so be careful with your heart. Guard it above all things, for out of it flow the issues of life. Like, be careful with this thing. Use this and nuances of this as a way of, you know, before you get serious with anybody.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Love it. I love it. I love you guys are open and hungry, and I believe wholeheartedly that all of you can possess yourselves all of these. And I believe this is a little, maybe sounds too idealistic, I don't think it is. And you can believe for God to bring someone who is in possession, in pursuit of all 10 of these. So I'm going to close with that prayer. Father, I just pray for each of these young men and women who love you, Lord, and they want to have good lives that honor you, and that are rich and full and life-giving. Lord, there's nothing more significant, no decision that's more significant than who they're going to marry, beyond obviously coming to know you. And so, Father, I just ask that you would put a real passion in each person here to pursue their own wholeness, their own growth. And Lord, as a result of that, they would really find themselves coming into contact with someone who possesses the same things, Lord. I'm asking, Father, that each person here would, anyone here who's in a relationship, and Lord, there's any flags, I pray by your Spirit, God, you would give grace to them to be able to hit the brakes or pump the brakes a little bit or whatever. Pray, God, that you would there'd be a grace for that. And those here who aren't dating anybody, I pray, God, you give them just a real sense of confidence in your desire to bring to them a solid, good spouse. Amen.
Amen.
Last thing I will say is the majority of people that you probably talk to and you engage with probably won't know much about number 2 in particular, which is the health of the family. But if they're humble, number 1, if you bring that up to them, they'll be interested, because people aren't dumb. Like, man, I mean, unless they're proud, people aren't dumb. And if you can help them realize, hey, Billy or Betty or whoever it is, if you are willing to deal with the wounds in your family, so much of the stuff you're struggling with can get, and our relationship can be better. You know, people who are, so again, back to, they don't have to be full tilt, rocking and rolling these 10, but just really, really, like, let's go kind of attitude, like, let's go after this.
That's good.
Cool.
Thank you.
My pleasure, love doing it. And this Sunday, I'm lecture teaching, and Jonathan and Olivia are leading worship. So come to Tuttle Vineyard, just as a visitor.
We'll send you the address, or
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know.
10:30 on Sunday.
30. Alrighty.
Good one.
I put it right there on the.
I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I did.
So this is one that I've kind of